Kirk Cousins is ready for prime time.
And I'm taking the Grim Reaper on Sunday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to a crossover Thursday presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So if you don't know me, I'm your humble host, one of two humble hosts here on Crossover Thursday. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, joined by Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs. And we're going to be previewing this Week 3 Sunday night primetime matchup between the Falcons and Chiefs. Get you guys into the biggest stories for both of these teams, key matchups, and keys to victory. And we thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of both of our podcasts, whether that means you make it your first listen or first watch each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, Chris, my friend, Chiefs are 2-0, getting their first road matchup here on primetime, something that's not too foreign to them. The Falcons don't have too many primetime games, although they're coming off a very impressive win last week against the Philadelphia Eagles. Chiefs coming off, I guess, a less than impressive win, but to me, it's always impressive how the Chiefs always manage a way to pull off a win, even when they don't necessarily play their best football. But I'm curious, when you talk about this Chiefs team heading into this matchup, traveling on the road to Atlanta, what to you maybe is the potential biggest concern for you?
Well, first off, Aaron, I am enjoying having the chance to talk to you again. It's been a while since we've done one of these. We just don't play that often.
Yeah.
But, I look at this game and I look at what the Chiefs did against the Bengals, and my biggest concern is their Jekyll and Hyde. And what I mean by that is if you go back and look at week 1, there's a lot to be excited about. They played pretty well against the Baltimore Ravens for most of the game. Yeah, it came down to a, last-second play at the end of the game with Isaiah likely stepping out of bounds, and they were able to win. But offensively, I think they played pretty well. And then you go back and you watch what happened in week 2. They started off the game. They played very well in the first quarter, the first drive. They didn't get down to third down until they were inside the 10-yard line, and then they had 2 third downs inside the 10-yard line, including, and then also 2 fourth downs inside the 10-yard line, converted 1, and then kicked a field goal. So I think you look at this, and then the next possession they come back and they throw an interception, but the offense just wasn't crisp the entire day. I think that's my biggest concern going into this one is the offense still hasn't figured it out yet. One of the big things that really stuck out to me was, Kingsley Suamataia, the rookie left tackle, got benched during the game. He had a really hard game against Trey Hendrickson, and they ended up benching him because of a holding penalty late in the game after he'd given up a couple of sacks. Brought back a huge play by Travis Kelce, and you hate to see that, but I think that's the big question going into this one is what is he going to do? What is Reed going to do? Who's he going to start at left tackle? Both Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia are preparing to start at left tackle for the Chiefs on Sunday, so don't know that we'll know until we get into getting field reports at the stadium.
Yeah. And I'm curious from your perspective, Chris, do you have a preference on who's going to start either one of this game? Because for me, I've watched Suamataia struggle these first 2 games. I don't know if Wanya Morris, based off of what little I saw, did massively better than him. Do you feel like one of those guys gives you a better shot against this Falcons team, where I'm imagining Matthew Judon is probably, licking his chops to get after either one of these guys?
As he should be. No, I think that if you look at it, you go back and watch Wanya Morris last year when he started, he struggled at times. The big thing that really sticks out to me, you go back and watch week 1, they didn't really give Suamataia any help. And that's something that they've done from time to time is put their tackles on islands. But Reed usually will give guys when they're struggling some help. He really didn't do that. He started to a little bit in the Bengals game. I'm curious to see if that's something that continues. To me, if they think Kingsley Suamataia is their left tackle of the future, I think that you have to put him back in there and you have to start him and you have to try to get him to play through it. I mean, it's his second start in the NFL. Yeah, it was rough. His first start wasn't great, but he's got the potential. I think he's got the pedigree to be able to play the position and play it well. It's just acclimating to the NFL level. And I think that there are things that you can do to help him. I mean, maybe don't take many deep drops, or, give him a tight end that's right next to him and chipping, or running back chipping every time that he's coming through. You can do things to help him in this game and going forward in the next couple.
Yeah. Now, when also maybe one thing that could potentially help them is the run game, right? If
Yep.
he's not pass protecting, that was the thing that he was known for at BYU, as being a physical run blocker. Suama Taia that we're referring to. And I'm wondering, how much concern is there for this run game with Isaiah Pacheco being out for 2 months or more with his injury? Does that mean, are we going to see a lot more Carson Steele, or is he going to be continue to be that short yardage guys? Is it Samaje Perine? They just picked up Kareem Hunt. So who are the Falcons potentially going to be preparing for at that running back position?
I'll be honest, I have no idea. And I say that because right now it's a question. I think if you look at who they have on the roster, you'd have to think it's going to be Carson Steele. I think that you would look at it as a situation of he would come in and be the starter. I don't think that they want to use Samaje Perine in that role. I don't think that that's something that he will excel at, and I don't think that you want him taking those hits. I think you want him fresh later in the season. This is a time to give Steele and to give him a chance to get back from what he did, last week. He had a good, pickup on a 4th down, and then he fumbled the ball. That's something you're going to do as a rookie. He's got to play. And in my mind, I think that that's the direction they go. For me, Kareem Hunt is a guy that's an unknown right now. We know what Kareem Hunt was 6 years ago, but he's not the same player. And the bigger question is he wasn't in training camp with anybody this offseason, so he's probably not going to be in football shape. I can't imagine that you want to stick him out there for 20 or 30 plays and have him be your guy this week coming off as a street free agent. Now, could he, because he knows the protections and he knows basically what the scheme is? Potentially, yes. And I think that's the other thing that works against Samaje Perine, is he's trying to learn the offense at the same time. I don't think you want to throw him in there with all of it. So to me, I'm guessing it's going to be Carson Steele. They also brought up Keontae Ingram from the practice squad. They just elevated him. And really quick, before we go on further, I will say that we did get some good news about Isaiah Pacheco. He had surgery on Wednesday, and it was announced that his surgery went very well, and there was no complications. So it should be 6 to 8 weeks before he's back, which puts him around the Bills game for me. And I would think that would be great for the Chiefs to be able to get him back for the stretch run.
Yeah, he's a very important player to this Chiefs offense. In addition to all the stars that everybody else knows, he's probably that big X factor when it comes to the run game. And we'll see if the Chiefs can sort of figure it out without him, as well as some of the concerns on their offensive line. Is there anything going on with the Chiefs defense, or is it business as usual? Spags, Chris Jones, all those guys rolling as usual?
I would say it's business as usual. The thing that stuck out to me that I'm going to be curious to continue to watch, week after week, is what they do with Leo Chenal. I was not expecting him to have the role he's had the first couple of weeks of the season, and he has just continuously gotten more lined up in more different positions and gotten on the field more than I was expecting him to. He even lined up a couple of times on offense, which was fun to see, kind of in a Mike Vrabel type role, though he didn't get a pass thrown to him, but it was still fun to see him on the field in jumbo situations and in that situation. So I'm curious to see what they do with him. But Trent McDuffie is Trent McDuffie, and I think that what you're going to see is Jalen Watson is playing a lot better than I was expecting he was going to. So the question I'm going to have going into this is, how are they going to attack Kyle Pitts, and how are they going to try to defend him? Because the Chiefs have really struggled against tight ends the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll see if Kyle Pitts is due for a breakout game. And it must be nice to be the Kansas City Chiefs, where you can feed the ball to Leo Chenal and Wanye Morris in the end zone, as opposed to the Atlanta Falcons, who've been dealing with their issues of getting their top playmakers that everybody expects to get the ball, the football in the end zone. But the Chiefs just do such a good job that they are able, like, let's throw a 6 offensive lineman out there and let him catch a touchdown pass. Let's put a linebacker out there and see what it can do.
Who doesn't love a big man touchdown, though? Yeah. I mean, come on. Be fair about it.
Yeah, it's great.
Everybody loves a big
man
touchdown.
I'm just so jealous that the Chiefs' success. So I'm just being petty and bitter about it.
You're good.
We'll see what the Falcons' biggest story are. It's going to involve Kyle Pitts and whether or not he can have a big game, and whether that's going to feed into the Falcons having another big offensive day like they had on Monday night. And we'll get into all of that, guys, as we continue today's Crossover Thursday. Now, for all of you that are familiar with collecting cards, and even those that aren't, you can wind up spending a lot of money for a Patrick Mahomes rookie card or the soon to be extremely valuable Michael Penix rookie card. And I want to help everyone save money thanks to the slab packs from arenaclub.com. Now it's possible to score gym mints for a fraction of their retail price. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, and auction. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform that you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LockedOnNFL, code LockedOnNFL for 10% off your first purchase. So continuing today's crossover Thursday, myself, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs. I want to let you guys know about this upcoming Week 3 matchup for the Falcons and Chiefs. But if you want to get caught up on all the other matchups around the NFL, of course, Locked On Podcast Network has you covered. And of course, you can check out the new Locked On NFL, 2 shows daily. Tyler Rowland, Tony Wiggins, giving you coverage for all the biggest stories around the NFL. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network. And of course, you can find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So when we talk about, what is the big story for the Falcons, it's kind of a similar conversation, that sort of Jekyll and Hyde situation where you kind of saw the ugly side of what the Falcons offense could look like in Week 1. And then you saw the brighter side of it in Week 2. And the question is, will we get a continuation of what we want to see from Week 2 into Week 3? And, I think a lot of that will be whether based off of their ability to get Kyle Pitts involved in the offense. As you mentioned, Chris, Chiefs have been very vulnerable to tight ends. I looked up the stats over these last 2 weeks. Tight ends have accounted for 30 targets, 25 catches, 286 yards, and a touchdown. That's about 54% of the passing yards that the Chiefs have given up have gone to tight ends. And so you're looking at it and thinking, hey, Kyle Pitts, he's better than Mike Gesicki. He's better than Eric All. He's better than Isaiah Likely. He should feast in this game. And so that to me is kind of, for me, the big story. Will we get the Falcons being able to feature Kyle Pitts in the ways that he hasn't consistently been featured, as I was alluding to earlier in Atlanta, much to the chagrin of all the fantasy fans and fantasy owners out there? And, what is for you, Chris, I'm curious, why do you feel like the Chiefs defense has been so plagued by the tight end position this season?
Well, I want to be fair. Isaiah Likely is a fantastic tight end. I don't think he gets enough credit when it comes to the tight ends in the NFL. I think he is probably, I'd say, the top 20 tight end easily in my mind. And he's just behind Mark Andrews, so I don't think he gets the credit. So I think he's a very good player. But the reality is Kansas City's linebackers have struggled in coverage, and they've got to figure something out that's going to work. And it's probably not going to be a linebacker. My guess is that what they're going to need to do is they're going to need to maybe take a linebacker off the field and bring a guy like Jaden Hicks down and have him play the tight end and go, more of a 3 or 4, even maybe a 4 safety set in some regards, because they like to have Chamari Connor on the field with Justin Reed and Brian Cook. So, in this situation, I do think that they've got to get it figured out. And I'm not sure what they're going to do, because it doesn't look like the linebackers have the ability to get to stay with the tight ends. And you talk about somebody like Kyle Pitts and the measurables and his ability to, his explosiveness and his speed. That's going to be a nightmare matchup for this Chiefs defense. And maybe you want to double him. Maybe that's what you do. And I think that there's potential value in that. But there are other, playmakers on Atlanta that you have to worry about as well.
Yeah, you got to see some of those playmakers make some big plays, especially at the end of that game against the Eagles, with Drake London catching the game-winning touchdown, Darnell Mooney having a couple of big catches there to really set up that score and whatnot. And so I'll be very curious to see if the Falcons can feature Kyle Pitts. That was an issue over the years under Arthur Smith, where you would go into some of these matchups and be like, oh, this team is vulnerable against this one thing. And then the Falcons wouldn't necessarily be able to feature that. But we'll see if Zach Robinson can do a better job of doing that and getting his playmakers more involved in that. There were very promising signs in that Monday night matchup against the Eagles. He's been extremely good going up against these Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay coaches, right? You go back to 2022, where based off my count, they've faced someone from that coaching tree about 13 times. They've given up an average of like 19 points a game. I think they've only given up 24 or more points 3 out of those 13 times, including last week against the Bengals with Zach Taylor coming from that McVay coaching tree. And Cincinnati had to kick 4 field goals in order to do that. So Spags is one of the best in the business. And so that to me is like, can we get Kyle Pitts involved? And can Zach Robinson be the exception as opposed to the rule of being one of these types of offenses that can actually do some damage against this Kansas City Chiefs defense? And then for me, the other question is, how do the Falcons block Chris Jones? They had a terrible game plan for TJ Watt in week 1, and he made several game-changing plays. And it was so baffling then, not to go back down the rabbit hole. Locked On Falcons fans know we spent a whole week talking about this, like how could they make this mistake? But like TJ Watt lines up on one side every single snap, and it's like it's easy to come up with easy to come up with a game plan to stop him,
right?
All that stuff. But Chris Jones lines up everywhere. Like, is it as simple, Chris, as hey, Chris Jones find the weakest link on that offensive line and just bull rush him into oblivion every single snap?
I'm not going to say it's that simple. I'd say it's really close. They like to move him around. I think, and I would have to go back and I'd have to look at the snap counts, but I don't think he's played right defensive end very often for the Chiefs. It's usually either one of the defensive tackle positions or left defensive end. So generally speaking, I don't think they have him going up against left tackles very often. Now, that's possible that will change in this game where they could move him around and do different things. I do think that I did. Now that I think about it, I think I saw him going up against Ronnie Stanley a couple of times against Baltimore. So, it's really going to just depend on what they feel like they can do and they can win. I will say this, the big question that I have when it comes to Kansas City and pass rush is who else is going to get home? Who else is going to get pressure? George Karlaftis is somebody that's really been getting after the quarterback. He has a nonstop motor. He's going to be, constantly going. But you go look at the other guys, and Mike Dana hasn't gotten much pressure this year. Charles Minnie, who's not expected back until November. And Tershawn Morton looks good and has his moments, but it's not consistent enough. So that's a real issue, getting, pressure on a quarterback. And that goes back to kind of what I said about Leo Chanel earlier is there was a couple of times where they actually walked him down into the box and had him either rush as a defensive end, or I think I even saw one against the Bengals where he rushes the defensive tackle as a linebacker. So that's kind of interesting from that aspect. But lots of different things Kansas City can do to get pressure, and it doesn't have to be just Chris Jones. One of the biggest plays against the Bengals last week was it looked like Shamari Connor was getting ready to help Trent McDuffie double up Jamar Chase. And instead, at the very last moment, as soon as the ball was snapped, Shamari Connor went from about 6 yards deep and sacked Joe Burrow on a big third down. And the Chiefs love to send their DBs after the quarterback. So that could be something that the Atlanta needs to be accounting for as well.
Yeah. And, for me, when I think about the matchup between the Chiefs offense and the Falcons defense, it's just basically, to me, it boils down to pressure, which is what we're talking about with the Chiefs and whatnot. And can the Falcons get pressure? We already talked about, the potential matchup between Matthew Judon and whoever lines up at left tackle. But, can they get it elsewhere? The Chiefs have one of the best, if not the best, interior offensive line in football. And so that's really where the Falcons' strength of their pass rush is. And Grady Jarrett has been consistently their most impactful pass rusher so far this year. And is he going to have a quiet game going up against guys like Joe Thuney and Trey Smith? And so, if Matthew Judon can wreak havoc in the ways that Trey Hendrickson, that might be enough that we saw last week. But, it would really help the Falcons if they can do a little bit more than that, simply because, I saw a stat today, Chris, that basically the only time the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes become human is when you can get him on the ground. I saw a stat where if he's sacked 4 or more times, and it's only happened 10 times in his NFL career, the Chiefs are 5-5 in those games. They're 500. It's coin flip at that point for them to win. 3 or more times, 18-11. That's basically the equivalent of a 10-win team. And then if you only sack him 2 or less times, Chiefs are 73-14. They win 84% of the games. It's basically a 14-win team. So basically the only way that you can make Patrick Mahomes human is get him on the ground, and you got to get pressure on him, and then you got to prevent him from doing all the Patrick Mahomes magic that he winds up doing, breaking outside the pocket, flipping it, 47 yards down the field to whoever those weapons are. And so it's a challenge.
Yeah, and you make a great point. It's not just getting – part of it is getting him on the ground, don't get me wrong, but the other part of it that you have to worry about is lately, And really, for the past several years, he's willing to take off and run if you give him open running lanes. So you have to contain him. You have to keep him inside the pocket and not let him get outside, because if he gets outside, he's willing to go, pick up the first down or, go get a couple of yards and live to fight another day. He's generally speaking not going to just throw the ball away and try to go to the next down. He's going to try to at least make some positive yardage. And that adds up when you start talking about the inches that it takes to win an NFL game.
Yeah, definitely. So he's in the conversation to be the greatest of all time for a reason. So we'll see if the Falcons can slow him down and be the 11th team to sack him 4 more times. And then there's a chance that they wind up winning this game. So that will get us to some of those keys to victory, including, getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes. And we'll break down, what are 3 ways that each one of these teams can, what 3 ways that each one of these teams can do in order to win this football game. We'll get into that as we wrap up today's Crossover Thursday. So, guys, I want to tell you about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And now they have something a little different, because through September 22nd, just a couple days left to take advantage of this offer, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And with that YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market gain. And all you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. And, when you get that free trial, check out the multi-view. We love to put in 4 different games. You can pick and choose what games you want. And when you're at FanDuel.com, check out the line for this Falcons-Chiefs game. Last time I checked, the Chiefs were favored by 3.5 points. Will the Falcons cover? Will the Chiefs cover? Check out the line for the Thursday night game between the Jets and Patriots, where the Jets are favored by 6.5 points. It's all available at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons here, joined by Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs, and it is Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Chris, let's talk about these keys to victory for each one of these teams. What are sort of the 3 things that you need to see from the Kansas City Chiefs in order for them to walk away with a victory?
So the big thing for me, and I will say I'm probably going to continue to have this until the Chiefs actually do something about it and end up on the right side of it, but it's win the turnover battle. Go watch the game against the Bengals. They had 3 turnovers versus the Bengals 1 turnover. They could have had 4 if you look at the penalty they got, or the one they got called back on penalty. You have to take care of the ball better, and the only way to beat teams, regardless of how good they are, and there's questions whether or not Cincinnati was a good team going into that game last week. But the big thing is if you give up the ball 3 times and you give up your possessions, you're not going to generally win games. You cannot continually do that and beat the good teams or even mediocre teams, I don't think, on a regular basis. So to me, the first one is win the turnover battle, keep control of the ball, and I think you'll be in good shape.
Okay. For me, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's pressuring Patrick Mahomes is one big key. As I mentioned with the stats, that the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes become a little bit more human when you can get him on the ground. And again, I think you got to take advantage of that one weakness at the left tackle position that several teams so far have been able to exploit, and the Falcons have to find a way to exploit it even further. And that's going to lead to, potentially a big day for Matthew Judon. And this is potentially the game that they're going to need him to show why they traded for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I look at, my second key to victory for Kansas City, it's, just do your job. And that goes back to what you were just talking about, the left tackle doing his job, keeping Judon at bay. But it also comes down to catching the ball when the ball is thrown to you, and Mahomes making good decisions. And it also goes back to not making penalties. If you can do those things, just doing your job, I think you have a great chance of walking out of this game with a victory, because, if they play basic fundamental football and are successful on a regular basis, then I think that they're going to score points, and it should be a game that they should be able to win.
Well, when you're talking about doing your job, my second key is someone do the job of blocking Chris Jones. If you can do that, good luck. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that being my job. I just get to talk about it on the podcast. But, good luck to whoever is tasked with that. As you mentioned, earlier in today's episode, Chris Jones lines up in a number of places. We'll probably see him going up against Falcons right tackle Caleb McGarry. We'll probably see him going up against both guards, Chris Lindstrom and Matthew Bergeron, and maybe they'll even have him go up against Jake Matthews, as you mentioned. Several of those guys tend to be a little bit more vulnerable to power than other guys, and so that's really where Chris Jones makes his hay as a pass rusher, where he can just use that length and that size and that physicality and just, walk you back into the quarterback. And that could be really problematic with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who isn't necessarily the most mobile quarterback at this stage, will not be doing all the Patrick Mahomes magic outside the pocket that we've seen on a regular basis there. So it's going to be really important to keep Chris Jones at bay however you can, whether that's chips, whether that's doubles, whether that's keeping, two running backs in the backfield, Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson, to kind of help out there. So the Falcons have to figure out some way to keep that top pass rusher at bay, something that they did not do in week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt.
You make a great point about Chris Jones with his power, but I will say this. The one thing that you continuously see from time to time is people try to be ready for that power and they overset themselves, and he takes advantage of it and uses speed to get around him and pushes their hands down. So that's something that they got to watch out for as well. The other big key to victory for me, if you're Kansas City, is you have to make it a one-dimensional game on the Atlanta side. Take away the run. Bring up a safety into the box, slow down the Atlanta running game. And one of the biggest reasons why that is such a big key in this game is because you're in a situation where the Chiefs have consistently had struggles late in the game with, especially against the Baltimore Ravens, where conditioning looked like it was a little bit of an issue, and you're not going to have a ton of guys that are going to be up and able to help you on a regular basis. So to me, it's make this a one-dimensional offense, stop the running game, and then make Kirk beat you with his decision-making and his throws. If you can do that, I think you have to feel pretty good, because I think the Chiefs secondary can be ready for it.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to not only that first dimension for the Falcons offense, running the football, I think the last key for me is that second dimension, which is get Kyle Pitts going. It would be nice to see Kyle Pitts having a big game on a national spotlight, so that the narrative about, him being overrated or him being a bust, and all these various things that seem to surround Kyle Pitts, who is a heck of a football player, but just hasn't necessarily put out the production. And as we've mentioned already on today's episode, the Kansas City Chiefs have struggled in the first 2 games covering tight ends. As Chris mentioned, Isaiah Likely and Mike Gesicki are good tight ends. I don't think either one of those guys is on the level of an athlete like Kyle Pitts. So it will be nice to see Zach Robinson being able to feature Kyle Pitts and attack that vulnerability in the Kansas City defense and get Kyle Pitts going. And that's going to create opportunities for some of the other weapons outside. And especially if you can couple that with the ground game spearheaded by Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, that is going to give you a complete offense that will allow you to at least try to keep pace with this Kansas City offense, should Patrick Mahomes do Patrick Mahomes things, as he so often does in, a dome stadium. So, the environment's going to be conducive for him to do Patrick Mahomes things. So, it's going to be an exciting game, regardless of what the result is going to be. But Chris, we'll leave out on sort of what's your final prediction for this Sunday night matchup between the Falcons and Chiefs?
I think the last time I can remember them playing in Atlanta, Mahomes had a 75-yard pass to Tyreek Hill. I'd like to see something like that again to Xavier Worthy. Don't know that we'll see it in this game, but that was a fun I think it was a preseason game, but it was a lot of fun. When I look at this, it's a question of, can Kansas City put up the points on the board? And I think that they can. I think that you look at what Mahomes and the Chiefs were able to do. The offense only scored, 19 points on the Bengals. 20 points, because they went for 2 and they didn't get it. So that's not horrible of an offensive output. 27 points the first week against the Ravens. So I feel like they're going to be able to score points. The question is, are the Falcons going to be able to keep up? I think Kansas City's defense is playing not necessarily where they were last year, but I think they're playing well enough to slow the Falcons offense down. I'm going to go, 27-20 Kansas City.
Yeah, I think that's about where I'm at. As I mentioned earlier, I think Steve Spagnuolo has a history of keeping the lids on, whether it's Kyle Shanahan, whether it's Sean McVay, whether it's Zach Taylor, Kevin O'Connell, et cetera. And so I'm not expecting Zach Robinson to be the exception as opposed to the rule. So that feels like the Falcons are probably going to score around 20 points. I don't know if that's enough against this Chiefs offense, who feels like a pretty comfortable that they're going to score around 24 points. I think because of some of the issues that we've discussed on today's Crossover Thursday, I don't expect the Chiefs to put up like, monster points like that we have seen this offense do before, but I'm expecting this to be a 24-20 Chiefs win. I think a very competitive game. I think it will come down to the wire in those final minutes. And unfortunately, it might be decided on who has the ball last, as we saw last week against Kirk Cousins against the Eagles. The Falcons have the ball last. Good things happen, but of course the Chiefs know that they got 7+ years of that other guy having the ball last, and he tends to find ways to get the wins. And so I do expect that to be the case. So Falcons maybe potentially fall 1-2. Chiefs continue their undefeated streak. But of course, Chris and I, along with Ryan Tracy of Locked On Chiefs, will have you covered on this matchup all weekend long. So continue to check out Locked On Falcons and Locked On Chiefs. We got more for you coming your way. Of course, make sure you continue to check us out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That is it for us, guys, for Crossover Thursday. Have a lovely day. Continue to check out all the great shows across the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.